Welcome to Talking Bengals, a Bengals site made by the fans for the fans. Check out Talking Bengals on iTunes, Google Play, Buzzsprout, and follow Talking Bengals on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Talking Bengals. Now, let's join the conversation. Hello and welcome to Talking Bengals, episode 24. We're finally getting away from some of those off-season topics and going to get into something a little bit different tonight. Fantasy football. We got our expert with us, John. How you doing?
Doing great, Casey. How you doing, man?
Well, it's another grinding week, but we're getting closer to football season, and I can't complain too much. Nick, how are you?
Doing all right. I don't know about fantasy football whiz or nothing. I mean, who won the fantasy football league last year, John?
Well, you got bragging rights for another couple months, but that's it.
I know I like me some brother rivalry going on here. It'll be entertaining, I'd imagine, tonight. So first things first, when we get into this topic, so fantasy football, which one of the Bengals players is going to be the best performer this year in fantasy? John, like I said, I'm calling you the expert, so let's see what you got.
Well, this is just a no-brainer. AJ Green, he's a top 10 talent. He's always first-round pick in our leagues. Depending on where one of the girls, Melissa, picks, he could be the overall number one pick from time to time. He's easily one of the best wideouts in the game. He's unstoppable. And with the new weapons we've added on offense, he's just going to be that much more dominant, in my opinion. What do you think, Nick?
I mean, I think AJ Green obviously is a go-to. But I'm going to have to also say I think Dalton's going to have a standout year this year. He's going to have multiple options, given another backfield, which is going to open up play actions down the field for big throws. So you got your what was that when you compound points down the field or whatever, big yard gains or whatever it's called. I'm just good at picking players. So I think the best fantasy performer is quite possibly going to be Andy Dalton because he's going to have targets to throw to. And we saw last time he actually had real targets to throw to. He had a really good year.
I mean, I can definitely say AJ Green, like you said, that's the no-brainer, John. But that's almost too obvious for me, so I'm not going to go that route. Andy Dalton, that's another one. He could have a lot of interceptions, shoot himself in the foot, have problems that way. So yes, Green will probably be the best performer if he stays healthy. Let's talk about another guy. If he could stay healthy, I think Tyler Eifert could be a standout guy. When he's in the lineup for Dalton, he always ends up catching a lot of touchdowns. Touchdowns equal the most points you can get in fantasy rather than just worried about yards. So if Eifert actually could stay healthy for an entire season, he may be one of the best point getters in the whole league, whatever fantasy league you're playing in. He's just a big target. He's good around the end zone. So he's somebody that's hard to doubt, but he's got to stay healthy. And I know somebody's got something to say about that.
I'll jump right in there everything that you're seeing. He hasn't played a full season. He's injury prone. I see what you're saying. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's a big factor in our offense. You've seen every year that he was healthy in the area that he was healthy in, that part of the season. He did really well. He's just got to be healthy. So, everybody's saying that he's going to be a bust this year. Obviously they're thinking, he's not going to make a full season. And he obviously lets anybody who picks him, he lets them down, obviously, in the playoffs because he's usually never healthy during the fantasy football playoffs. But, I'm going to be honest with you, I can care less about fantasy as long as the Bengals do something good. So, John?
Well, the problem here is Tyler Eifert still has never made a full season. He hasn't even come close. He hasn't even played in a fantasy playoff game yet in his career, I don't think. He torched me last year in at least one league. So, but to call him a bust, I think is a little bit much because at this point you really have to lower your expectations. You might be looking at 5 or 6 touchdowns on the year and maybe 400 to 500 yards, and that's really all you can expect at this point. anything more than that, and he's far exceeded his expectations. When you're drafting for fantasy, you're drafting for high floor, and he's a high ceiling player, so he's more of a big risk that you're going to take later on in the draft, not in the front rounds.
So speaking of guys to take in the draft, how about a couple of the Bengals draft picks this year? You know, John Ross, Joe Mixon, they come to mind, but there's been a couple others as well. Which one of those guys would you take a risk on in, the top 3 rounds? Nick?
In top 3, I'm probably going to say Ross is going to be the best return, mostly because, I mean, he's just more likely a more developed player. He also has somebody on the opposite side, you know, AJ Green, who's going to take away a lot of the double coverage, if any. So, I mean, I think John Ross is going to be, I mean, another good receiver pick, even though he's playing with AJ Green. Just because if AJ's not open, you get Ross. But at the same time, you know, Mixon, he always has that capability of a big play, you know, with the speed. So, but he has to split time with Gio and Jeremy, so you're looking at problems there with points. So you're looking at somebody who will get big points, and Ross is fast, could get down the field, big play potential. So I think Ross would be a good one. John?
Well, this is sort of a loaded question because you're not taking either one of these two players in the first 3 rounds. Rookie wide receivers historically do not contribute to fantasy points. And the way that Ross is set up, he reminds me of Deshaun Jackson so much with his just down the field speed, big playability. He's really going to be more of a daily fantasy option where he's going to get him on the cheap, and he'll just have games where he's just going to score you tons of points. However, Mixon is going to be an X factor. This dude is one hell of a back. I'm hearing comparisons of Adrian Peterson to this guy and Le'Veon Bell. He's got it all. As long as he can keep his nose clean, he's easily going to overtake Jeremy Hill as the lead back eventually, just depending on how dumb our offensive coordinator wants to play it. And unfortunately, Gio's coming back from the knee injury. He's not going to be up to speed this season. We've seen that time and time again. So if I had to take one, I'm definitely taking Mixon, but I don't think he's anything higher than a 4th or 5th round pick. What are your thoughts, Case?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. It's kind of a stretch to take him in the 3rd round, but somebody's going to be that gambler. Somebody's going to think, okay, this guy, especially Bengals fans, they're going to either reach on Ross or on Mixon. I don't know, Nick. I thought you were kind of going to back up your Tennessee Volunteers and say, well, Josh Malone, but that'd have been really a dangerous pick because I don't even know how much playing time, if any, he's going to get this season. But without a doubt, in my mind, it's Mixon. Weren't happy about him getting drafted, but the more you look at how he plays, the more, if he can keep his nose clean and stay out of trouble. Like John said, he's an X factor. He's somebody who could be a really big contributor. And you never know. Jeremy Hill had that rookie season where, he just ran away with the last 8 games of the season, just had phenomenal numbers. That could be Joe Mixon this year. He's somebody that, if he goes undrafted in your league, I would definitely go ahead and just claim him with whatever garbage you decide to pick up in late rounds. That's a bad decision because he may not pan out in week 1, 2, or 3 because the Bengals historically, we're going to give our veterans a chance. So, yeah, Hill's going to get the ball off the most beginning of the first couple games. But I think by about week 4, week 5, for sure, you're going to start seeing a lot more Joe Mixon if he's healthy. Because Jeremy Hill still can't cut it. I don't care if it's a contract year or not. It's just not going to happen. He's had his chances. So let's give the guy with some fresh legs, some motivation, and some desire. Let's get him out there. Let's let him see what he can do. So, Nick, I know earlier you were talking about Andy Dalton and think he could be a big standout guy. So in fantasy this year, out of all the quarterbacks in the NFL, is Dalton in the top 5 for fantasy quarterbacks?
Well, why not? I'll play to it. I like it. I mean, obviously I'm a Bengals fan. I'm rooting for Dalton to have John Ross, Brandon LaFell, Boyd, AJ Green. I mean, and then you have, Jeremy Hill and Gio and then Mixon. I mean, you have all these weapons that he can throw to, give the ball to. I mean, if he doesn't have a good year this year, he's not going to ever have another good year. So, I mean, I'm going to bet on him. I'm not a betting man, but, I mean, I guess I'd put a penny down on it. But, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that he's going to be a top 5 quarterback this year, as long as all of his wide receivers are healthy. Even if he loses maybe Brandon LaFell, or if he loses Boyd maybe to an injury. Of course, Eifert's probably going to go out here and there with sprains or something. But as long as he has at least 2 or 3 weapons to throw to, I think he'll be okay. I think he'll have a good season. Sorry, John, go ahead.
I think to even consider Andy Dalton as a top 5 quarterback, I mean, I think you have to be highly intoxicated. For fantasy purposes, he's always, I mean, maybe top 10 to 15, but he's never going to exceed quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, these guys put up numbers that Dalton just can't get to, especially with the old ground and pound philosophy of Marvin Lewis. I mean, Dalton's a fine quarterback, and we might be able to get some playoff wins from him, but fantasy purposes, if you want to draft Dalton, you're taking him in one of the late rounds, and you're really building other positions instead of quarterback, and you're definitely trying to get another top tier quarterback way before Dalton. Any thoughts on that case?
Yeah, top 5, I don't think so. I mean, now in actual like MVP type running, I think he has a better chance of getting an NFL MVP than he does being a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Maybe those go hand in hand. But like I said, that's just he can't compete with some of those people who have just put up big numbers for years. Tom Brady is always going to be in the top. Aaron Rodgers is always going to be in the top. They always talk about Andrew Luck. He's going to get more weapons. He's going to go back into the top. Drew Brees has great numbers whether the Saints are good or not. So Dalton, like I said, the mentality of the Bengals just isn't going to help him out. And, they throw a lot of short passes. He doesn't have a great arm. He's not going to usually beat you with a long ball. So he doesn't get all those, huge stats for, 40-plus yard passes a whole lot. He's a lot more of, short, intermediate routes that'll hit on a quick hit, and maybe they'll go for a little bit or, just methodically drive down the field. So he is a good quarterback. He's definitely somebody I would take, as a backup, if he's still there in the mid rounds after you already have a solid starter that maybe is injury prone or has some problems with injuries. I would take Dalton as, a good safety outlet if you have good players around him. But, it is what it is, but Dalton's not going to quite be a top 5 quarterback in my opinion. So talking about people who could be a really big surprise this season, let's think about our biggest fantasy steals that are on the Bengals roster right now. Nick, what do you got?
I think one of the biggest steals is going to be either Brandon LaFell or Boyd, just simply because nobody thinks they're going to do anything. I mean, you're going to have, other coaches looking at Ross and looking at AJ Green, and they're going to be looking at trying to cover those guys. You're looking at the deep ball with Ross, and you're looking at somebody who can cut and make plays with AJ Green. What about that slot receiver? What about Hushman-Zada? I mean, I think that Brandon LaFell or Boyd could step out and be that guy. John?
Well, when you're talking about steals, you're talking about a late round pick that's going to far exceed expectations. And I think I already touched on this a little bit, and I think that player is Tyler Eifert. He's got all the upside in the world. If he somehow makes it to the 10th round or later in your league and you're there to draft him, he's got potential to throw up 15 touchdowns and 1,000 yards as a tight end. So I think he's really the one shining star that could be just a huge sleeper for this Bengals team. Casey?
I'm going totally maybe off the reservation here because it's not a thing that's considered a whole lot in fantasy. But I'm going with the Bengals defense on this one. I mean, defenses are not usually drafted very high in fantasy football. And I feel like the Bengals are probably going to be a little bit underrated coming into the year. Secondary hasn't changed a whole lot. Linebacker core, in my opinion, has improved quite a bit. Defensive line should be better. So, maybe they'll come up with more turnovers this year. Maybe they turn some of those turnovers into points. Maybe get back into, a lot of sacks. So I think the Bengals defense is going to be ranked pretty low. And there's somebody that I would say, obviously, you don't take a defense in the top 10 rounds very often, but, take them when you can if they're available, because I think they're going to surprise people. They're definitely going to be a top 10 defense as far as, the actual stats go. So I think take the Bengals defense. That's going to be the biggest deal that you can find. Anybody got a rebuttal on that one?
I just want to say that was probably my second choice, mainly for the fact that if John Ross starts returning kicks, I mean, he's got the huge play potential as a kick returner, too. So, I mean, that's a huge factor, Casey. I'm right there with you on that one.
All right, so that pretty much covers a lot of our fantasy stuff. So we're going to get away from it for a minute here and go into the series we've been doing this offseason, which is the 50th season reflections. Talking about those, good, hardworking, blue-collar players, people that made an impact on the Bengals and Cincinnati. And we're not going into the stars. We're trying to, stay with people. We went Ickey Woods one week. I know he's a star, but short-lived career. But we're trying to get with those guys who maybe don't get the recognition, the guys who maybe get swept under the rug a little bit and forgot about. And that's kind of the guy we have this week. We're going with Lee Johnson, punter for the Bengals. And he kind of, left in a bad way, but he did a lot of good things while he was here. So, John, I'll let you lead off about Lee Johnson.
Lee Johnson was always the guy. He always seemed like he was on the field when I was a kid and watching these games. I mean, I can remember him just being one of the best punters in the league for so many years. He just it always seemed like he was at least 50 yards on every kick. I mean, he was invaluable. It's just too bad we couldn't get a team around him at some point. But he's definitely, highly regarded amongst Bengals. So I think it's a good person to single out this week. What do you think about him, Nick?
I mean, obviously, special teams is a lot of where the games are won. Lee Johnson, I mean, had we had the team around him like what John was saying, I think that we'd have won a lot more games because of him. He had a long punt of 90. I mean, and just playing for the Bengals when he did, he got a lot of practice at it. I mean, he played 11 years for it out of his 18 seasons. Like Casey said, he left us with bad taste in the mouth, but at the same time, he gave us good years. He gave us 11 good years of a good, reliable punter that when we brought him out on the field, we didn't need to worry about what he was doing. We knew he was going to get a good punt out. I think his average was like 40 yards a punt, which is a big game changer when you're talking about field position. And field position is huge in football. And just the field position change that he would create was just absolutely phenomenal. And you can't sing enough praise for a good punter or a good place kicker. I mean, special teams is where it's at. And when you got a good kicker, it makes things a lot better. Casey.
Well, yeah, John, that made me laugh to myself there where you're talking about you saw him on the field so much because, yeah, he's one of the people that definitely stands out if you watch the Bengals during the 90s. I mean, there was a lot of 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Oh, here comes Lee Johnson. One thing I do recall for a personal memory on him, I can't remember who the Bengals were playing. I wish I could. But he could not do an onside kick to save his life, though. It cracked me up. That he put it on there. He kicked it straight out of bounds. They gave him another shot at it for some reason. He kicked it out of bounds again. And then the other team got the ball. And I was like, wow, great punter. Terrible kickoff guy. Don't let him kick off. But, the way he left, he made some comments saying that the front office needed some changes, and that was holding the team back. Who could agree more? He's not lying. He was saying 100% what was correct. That was a terrible front office in the 90s. In my opinion, still pretty much a terrible front office in a lot of ways. I mean, they've gotten better with players they draft, not getting so many busts. But he spoke his mind. He was honest. He had been around long enough. He knew his contract was up. So I applaud him for, having the courage to say what needed to be said anyway, what most of the players were probably thinking, and definitely what most of the fans, if not all of the fans, were thinking during the 90s. Just a miserable decade there. It's just an abyss. So, I remember, he did a lot of things in the community with Pelfrey as well, because, Doug Pelfrey did all of his different charities and stuff, and Lee Johnson and him did a lot of things together. So he did good stuff for the community. He served the Bengals well, and he had some guts to stand up to the Mike Brown organization, which, as we all know, is not the best in the NFL. It's pretty much garbage most of the time. Well, that takes us into our favorite part of the show, which is Roasted or Boasted. So just to clarify one more time, if you do like the subject, you are going to boast it. If you don't like the subject, you're going to roast it. So this week, the first comment we're going with, Jeremy Hill will be a fantasy bust. Roasted or boasted, John?
I am going to roast this simply because I don't feel like he really has any expectations. His bar is so low this year. I mean, personally, I wouldn't expect more than 400 or 500 yards and maybe a couple touchdowns. I mean, I just feel like Joe Mixon's going to take over the starting job very, very quickly. So I think I'm going to roast that because I don't really think there's any expectations for Jeremy Hill. At least for me, there isn't. What do you think, Nick?
Well, the question being, Jeremy Hill will be a fantasy bust. I'm going to agree. I'm going to boast that, just simply because, like what John was saying, Mixon's going to come in maybe 3-4 games into the season and just take over. He's an athlete. He's a guy who can perform. He can come out day in and day out. He's young. He's got the ability to come out and do what needs to be done. He's quite sizable for a running back. He's somebody who can run power, but also can run side to side. So, I mean, he's an all-around running back, someone that the Bengals have been looking for a while. So, Jeremy Hill is going to be a bust this year. I'm going to boast that, Casey.
Well, I'm definitely going to boast he's going to be a bust because, he's starting off as the number one running back, more than likely coming out of camp in the preseason. And he's just not going to cut it. But let's go a different route with that. So since we all think that Mixon is going to take the job and run away with it, do you try to get something for Jeremy Hill? Do you try to trade him? Do you try to get a little bit of money back on your investment? What do you think, John?
I don't think that anybody would take him. Just simply the fact that running backs seriously have no value at this point in the NFL. They're probably the lowest rung on the totem pole. I mean, everybody just wants to draft one and stick them in and make sure they can catch passes. Well, Jeremy Hill can't catch, and he's definitely not quick enough, and he doesn't want to run over anybody anymore. So I really feel like he's at a point in his career where it's just about over, sadly, because he had such high promise coming right out of LSU. It's really kind of been sad to watch. Any thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with John. I mean, I don't really know what value he would have. I mean, obviously, Cleveland would probably trade somebody for him, but who are we going to get from Cleveland? But I mean, he's not going to run over anybody. He can't catch a ball. I mean, sadly, like what John was saying, I mean, it's probably towards the end of his career for the NFL because he's just lost that toughness factor. Case.
I like your Cleveland idea. Maybe we'll tell Cleveland we want their first-round draft pick next year for Jeremy Hill. As crazy as they are, they may actually go for that. So we can get a first overall pick and we can win a few games possibly. But I digress with that. The Bengals defense will be a top 10 in fantasy this year is our next question. Nick, I'll give this one to you.
Why not? I'll boast it. I may be playing devil's advocate. But, I mean, I think the Bengals defense is going to come around. They've always been a solid defense. It's just, staying healthy. Adam Jones staying out of jail. I mean, quite frankly, it's just, I think it's safe to say that they're going to be good this year. But for how long, I don't know. Hopefully it's for the whole season and some postseason, maybe even to championship if we're lucky. But I don't know. I'm going to boast it. Why not? Casey?
So I'm going to boast it as well, but I'm not as just barely putting my toe in the water on it. I think they're definitely going to be probably top 5 in my opinion. You got a lot of youth on there. You've got rid of, the dead weight of Ray Luga. So that's obviously going to help the team to begin with. But, you got some good young players. And I think, from a defense that was really great in the league in 2015 to really not very good last year, they're going to come back with a fire. They want to prove, we can do this. We can play at this level. So I think they'll get back to getting some pressure on the quarterback, getting some more sacks, causing more turnovers. And that's what really defense is all about. You got to sack the quarterback, and you got to cause turnovers. That's what you have to do with this whole bend, don't break mentality that you always hear the commentators talk about. Well, they only gave up a field goal. That's a bunch of crap. You got to cause turnovers. You got to cause sacks. You got to make the other team go backwards and lose the opportunity to get points altogether. John, what do you think?
Casey, I'm right there with you, man. I'm boasting this all the way. 2 reasons. Number one, Fontes is back. I think he's about to take a ginormous step forward in a leadership role this year. Really bring these young guys along with him. I can see the maturation happening. He was a good citizen on the field last year. Let's hope that can continue. And the other reason I think the Bengals offense is going to be much improved over last season, which means obviously the defense isn't going to have to play as many minutes as they did last year. Over the second half of last season, the defense was stout. It's stout as they could be. Our offense just wasn't good enough to get us over the hump. I think this year we have a much easier schedule. We're going to be playing a lot of below 500 teams from last season. I think the Bengals are set up really pretty to make a big run this year.
So we're going to go into our more lighthearted, roasted or boasted topic. So back to the fantasy thoughts here. So a lot of leagues are cash leagues. You got to pay in, and then, they'll split the pot maybe at the end between the top 2 or top 3 people. But when it comes to a buy-in in a fantasy football league, is $100 too high of a buy-in? John, what do you think?
Absolutely not. They got the daily fantasy things for 25 grand or whatever. I mean, it's all about your situation in life. It's all economies of scale, If somebody's willing to pay it, it's never enough. I've played in multiple leagues worth that and then some, and it just adds to the excitement. And I know what my little brother Nick's gonna say, but I'll let him have the mic anyway.
I mean, of course it's too much. I mean, $100. Come on, who's going to put up $100? I mean, you have your gamblers. Well, that's just about it. You have your gamblers, your people who like to gamble, and that's about all who's going to put in $100 for a fantasy league. I mean, you make the fantasy leagues affordable, and you have a heck of a lot more people in. You may get $40-$50 maybe tops, for a fantasy league. In that fantasy league, you're probably going to get, anywhere between 20 to 50 people in the league. And I mean, just by numbers, you're going to have a bigger pot. So, I mean, I don't know. John was saying economics, whatever. If you can pay for it, you can pay for it. I understand what he's saying, but I'm going to roast it, or pardon me, I'm going to boast it. Obviously it's too high for a fantasy league. Casey.
Nick, I've said it before, but I got to say it again. You are the Yogi Berra of this show, and I just love it. It cracks me up every week. But I got to go with definitely going to boast that it is $100 is too high. That's just too much money to pay for fantasy football, man. I got kids. My kids got to eat. Got to put clothes on them. They're expensive. I don't know. I'm stingy with my money, though, so I would say it's too high. But I also think, not buying off the value menu at McDonald's is too expensive. So giving my opinion on what's expensive, what's not, it's not very good. John probably has the most holistic look of everybody in this conversation. So I think me and Nick are tightwads. We just don't want to spend any money on anything. So John's probably right and we're probably wrong, even though I'm going to stick to I'm going to boast it's too much money. Probably not in the right end of that conversation. That's going to roll us right into our final thoughts for the week. So, John, as the guest, we'll give it to you first.
Final thoughts are I'm just so excited that the All-Star break is here. We're sitting at 0-0 currently, in case everybody's watching, and fantasy football is right around the corner. This is go time. You got to start doing your research now. You got to get it lined up. You got to get your sleepers in. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to take the trophy from Nick this year. He's been a bad champ this year, I think. He's been way too much bragging. So I got to take it from him, knock him down a peg or two. Nick?
Oh, you can't brag too much, especially when you beat your older brother in fantasy football who sits there and studies all day long. And all you do is just pick players who are good. But my final thoughts are going to be I can't wait to actually have a football season that I'm excited for. I mean, you have an offense that's developing into, something that's, powerful. I mean, you have a backfield that has competition. You have your wide receivers that have a lot of competition. And then you have a defense that, I mean, I think we're not returning two or three people. And I think that we're going to do all right with replacing them. Although Pecco is obviously a heartfelt loss. But, I mean, I'm excited for the first time in a while for the Bengals to play football. I'm excited for it. I mean, I can't wait for the season. Even though I'll be working on Sundays, I'll be, sitting there listening to it on a radio and, trying to make sure I can hear every play. I'm excited. Casey?
Well, I'm very excited for football season. And, after the 4th of July, it's getting into a really critical time, and especially when it comes to high school football. And I'm going to talk about those, unsung heroes that are the high school football coaches and the Pee Wee coaches, the people who are out there, running two-a-days with these kids nowadays, which worries me. Millennial generation, I could not even imagine having to coach them. It has to be just a nightmare and a half. So hats off to all those coaches who are still out there putting in the work, putting in the effort, dealing with these kids who have never had to overcome adversity, dealing with these snowflake generation. Trying to coach somebody who feels entitled has to be a very difficult thing. So, just continue to work with them, continue to give them that good work ethic, keep doing all the great things that you're doing to help develop these young people. And, because coaches make a big impact on each one of our lives. So I can think of 5 or 6 coaches off the top of my head that have, something they said really stuck with me, something that they taught me I still use on a daily basis. Nick, I know you remember Coach Niederman. The day before thing still stays stuck in my head. And I will actually use that when I'm running laps. It's the lap before the lap before. It's got to be a good one. So, just hats off to all the coaches out there. Keep working hard. Hopefully these kids turn around and you can make them into good adults. But that's pretty much going to wrap it up for us this week. So thank you for tuning in to Talkin Bengals. Check us out on iTunes, Google Play, Buzzsprout. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Hooday.
Hooday.
Who dat?